On April 6, 1917, the United States Congress voted to declare war on the German Empire. It was a momentous decision that shattered a century of American isolationism and committed the nation to a European war that had already consumed millions of lives. Within days, American soldiers were being mobilized. American ships were preparing to cross the Atlantic. American factories were being converted to produce the munitions of industrial slaughter. But buried in the fine print of that declaration was a peculiar omission. The United States declared war on Germany. It did not declare war on Austria-Hungary, the other Central European power fighting alongside Germany. And most significantly, it did not declare war on the Ottoman Empire, the sprawling Islamic state that stretched from Constantinople to the Arabian Peninsula, from the Balkans to Mesopotamia. This was not an oversight, it was a deliberate choice, and that choice would have consequences that echo through the Middle East to this very day. Because while American soldiers were dying in the trenches of France to defeat German militarism, American missionaries were operating freely inside Ottoman territory, while the British and the French were carving up the Ottoman Empire like a Christmas turkey, promising the Arabs independence while secretly planning to colonize them. The United States was positioning itself as the one Western power with clean hands. To understand why America never fought the Ottomans, we have to understand what the Ottoman Empire actually was in 1917. And to understand that, we need to strip away the Orientalist fantasies of harems and sultans and look at the cold, strategic reality. By 1917, the Ottoman Empire was a dying patient on life support, kept alive only by German money and German military advisors. It had once been a superpower that terrified Christian Europe. At its height in the 16th century, Ottoman armies had besieged Vienna. Ottoman fleets had dominated the Mediterranean. The Sultan in Constantinople ruled over more territory than any European monarch. But 3 centuries of decline had reduced the empire to the sick man of Europe. It had lost Greece, lost Serbia, lost Romania, lost most of its European territories in a series of humiliating defeats. The Young Turk Revolution of 1908 had tried to modernize the state, to transform it from a medieval theocracy into a modern nation. But the reformers had failed. By the time the Great War began, the Ottoman military was a hollow shell. Its soldiers were brave, but they were equipped with obsolete weapons, led by incompetent commanders and fighting on too many fronts. When the war broke out in August 1914, the Ottoman leadership faced a choice. They could remain neutral, which would probably mean being partitioned by the victors, regardless of who won, or they could pick a side and gamble on survival. The British had just seized 2 battleships that the Ottomans had purchased and paid for, ships that were being built in British yards. The entire Ottoman public had donated money to buy those ships. Children had given their pocket money. The seizure was a national humiliation. Germany, by contrast, was offering respect, offering military aid, offering a chance to reverse the decades of decline. So in November 1914, the Ottoman Empire entered the war on the side of Germany. It was a catastrophic decision. Within months, Ottoman forces were fighting the Russians in the Caucasus, the British in Egypt and Mesopotamia, and dealing with internal revolts from Arab nationalists and Armenian separatists. The Ottoman entry into the war transformed the conflict. It opened up new fronts. It threatened the Suez Canal, Britain's lifeline to India. It gave Germany a tool to destabilize British and French colonial holdings by calling for Islamic holy war against the Christian empires. The Sultan declared a jihad. He called on Muslims everywhere to rise up against their colonial masters. It was a propaganda move, but it terrified London and Paris. They had millions of Muslim subjects in India, in Egypt, and North Africa. If those populations rebelled, the empires would collapse. But here's where the American position becomes interesting. When the United States entered the war in April 1917, President Woodrow Wilson faced a complex calculation. His stated reason for going to war was to make the world safe for democracy. He framed the conflict as a moral crusade against German autocracy and militarism. But if the war was about democracy and freedom, how could he ally with the British Empire, which ruled over a quarter of humanity without their consent? How could he partner with the French, who were busy suppressing nationalist movements in their colonies? Wilson needed a way to fight Germany without endorsing European imperialism, and the Ottoman Empire became his escape hatch. Wilson declared that America was at war with the German government, not with the German people. He said, "The United States had no quarrel with Austria-Hungary or with the Ottoman Empire." He said American war aims were limited to defeating German militarism. This was a fiction, of course, but it was a useful fiction. It allowed Wilson to position the United States as a different kind of power. Not a colonial empire like Britain and France, not a militaristic autocracy like Germany, but a disinterested arbiter, a nation fighting for principles rather than territory. The practical effect of this policy was that American forces would fight in France. They would fight on the Western Front. But they would not be sent to fight in the Middle East. They would not be sent to Mesopotamia, where British and Indian troops were slowly advancing up the Tigris River toward Baghdad. They would not be sent to Palestine, where General Allenby was preparing to march on Jerusalem. And they would not be sent to the Dardanelles, where the failed Gallipoli campaign had cost the Allies hundreds of thousands of casualties. This decision had immediate benefits for American interests. The Ottoman Empire was home to hundreds of American missionaries. These were not government agents. They were private citizens, mostly Protestant evangelicals, who had been working in Ottoman territory for decades. They ran schools, they ran hospitals, they ran orphanages. Robert College in Constantinople, founded by American missionaries, was one of the premier educational institutions in the entire Middle East. These missionaries were a powerful lobby in American politics. They had connections in Congress, they had influence with churches and civic organizations across America, and they sent back a steady stream of reports about Ottoman atrocities. Reports about the Armenian genocide, about the mass starvation, about the death marches. These reports inflamed American public opinion against the Ottomans. But the missionaries also warned that if America declared war, they would be expelled, their schools would be closed, their hospitals would be seized, and the hundreds of thousands of Armenian, Greek, and Assyrian Christians who depended on American protection would be slaughtered. Wilson listened. He decided that American missionaries operating inside the Ottoman Empire were worth more than American soldiers fighting there. So he kept America out of the Ottoman War. He allowed the missionaries to stay, and he used their presence as a tool of soft power, positioning America as the protector of Christians in the Muslim world. But there was another factor, a more cynical factor. American businessmen had investments in the Ottoman Empire. Standard Oil had negotiated for drilling rights in Mesopotamia. American banks had loaned money to the Ottoman government. American merchants were trading in Smyrna and Aleppo and Baghdad. If America declared war, those investments would be at risk. The Ottomans would seize American property. American contracts would be void. The business lobby, like the missionary lobby, wanted America to stay out of the Ottoman War. They argued that America's economic future in the Middle East depended on not being seen as another colonial aggressor. They argued that after the war, when the British and French were carving up Ottoman territory, America would need to be seen as neutral, as an honest broker, in order to secure its share of the oil in the markets. So Wilson gave them what they wanted: no declaration of war against the Ottomans, American neutrality in the Middle East conflict. But American soldiers dying in France to defeat Germany. The British were furious. They were bleeding in Palestine. They were bleeding in Mesopotamia. They were bleeding at Gallipoli. And the Americans were refusing to help. The French were equally angry. They had been promised Syria and Lebanon in the secret Sykes-Picot Agreement. They were already making plans to colonize the Levant, and they wanted American soldiers to help them conquer it. But Wilson held firm. He made his position clear in the 14 points, his vision for the post-war world. Point 12 addressed the Ottoman Empire directly. It stated that the Turkish portions of the Ottoman Empire should be assured secure sovereignty, but the other nationalities under Turkish rule should be assured security of life and an absolutely unmolested opportunity of autonomous development. It was a careful formulation. It recognized Turkish sovereignty over Turkey proper, but it called for autonomy for the Arabs, the Armenians, the Kurds, and other subject peoples. It was a rejection of the old imperial system. It was a call for self-determination. And it positioned America as the champion of the oppressed nationalities against both Ottoman tyranny and European colonialism. Of course, the British and French had no intention of honoring that principle. They had already divided up the Middle East between themselves. The Sykes-Picot Agreement gave France control of Syria and Lebanon. It gave Britain control of Mesopotamia and Palestine. The Arabs, who had been promised independence in exchange for revolting against the Ottomans, were going to be betrayed. But Wilson didn't know the details of Sykes-Picot. It was a secret agreement. When he found out about it at the Paris Peace Conference in 1919, he was horrified. He felt betrayed. He believed that the British and French had lied to him about their war aims. He believed that they had used American soldiers as cannon fodder to secure their colonial ambitions. But by then it was too late. The war was over. The Ottoman Empire had surrendered. The victors were busy dividing the spoils. The Treaty of Sèvres in 1920 was supposed to be the Ottoman equivalent of the Treaty of Versailles. It partitioned the empire. It gave eastern Anatolia to an independent Armenia. It gave western Anatolia to Greece. It gave the Straits to an international commission. It reduced Turkey to a rump state around Ankara. It was a death sentence, but the Turks refused to die. A nationalist movement led by Mustafa Kemal, later known as Ataturk, rejected the treaty. They organized a resistance. They drove out the Greeks. They reconquered Anatolia. And they forced the Allies to negotiate a new treaty. The Treaty of Lausanne in 1923 was the real end of the Ottoman Empire. It recognized the Republic of Turkey as a sovereign nation. It erased the humiliating provisions of Sèvres, and it established Turkey as the successor state to the Ottoman Empire. Ataturk had achieved what the sultans could not. He had saved Turkey from partition. He had transformed the country from a medieval empire into a modern, secular nation-state. And here's the irony. Throughout this entire process, from the end of World War I through the Turkish War of Independence, the United States maintained relations with the Turkish nationalists. American missionaries continued to operate in Turkey. American diplomats negotiated with Ataturk. And American public opinion, influenced by missionary reports and by Wilson's idealism, was generally sympathetic to the Turkish cause. The fact that America had never declared war on the Ottoman Empire meant that America was not party to the Treaty of Sèvres. It was not bound by its terms. And when the Turks rejected Sèvres and fought for their independence, America was able to recognize the new Turkish Republic without betraying any wartime commitments. This gave America a unique position in the post-war Middle East. Britain and France were colonial occupiers, hated by the Arab populations they ruled. But America was seen as different. America had not fought the Ottomans. America had not seized Ottoman territory. American missionaries had protected Christian minorities. And American rhetoric about self-determination had inspired nationalist movements across the region. Of course, that moral high ground was quickly squandered. American oil companies moved into Mesopotamia as soon as the British secured it. American banks financed the development of Middle Eastern oil fields, and American foreign policy, despite Wilson's idealism, became focused on securing access to oil and containing Soviet influence. But the decision not to declare war on the Ottoman Empire in 1917 had lasting consequences. It preserved American influence in Turkey. It allowed American missionaries and educators to continue their work. And it created a narrative, however false, that America was different from the European colonial powers. That narrative mattered. When Arab nationalists looked for allies against British and French colonialism in the 1920s and 30s, they looked to America. When Turkey needed a counterweight to Soviet pressure in the Cold War, it turned to America. The seeds of the post-war American dominance in the Middle East were planted in 1917 when Wilson decided that America's war was with Germany, not with the Ottomans. But there's a darker side to this story. By not declaring war on the Ottoman Empire, America also avoided taking responsibility for the Armenian genocide. The mass killings had begun in 1915. By 1917, more than 1 million Armenians had been murdered or died on death marches. American missionaries witnessed the atrocities. They documented them. They sent desperate cables to Washington begging for intervention. But Wilson did nothing. He expressed sympathy. He allowed private relief efforts. But he would not risk American interests in the region by confronting the Ottoman government. The missionaries stayed. The genocide continued, and America maintained its neutrality. After the war, there was a brief moment when it seemed like America might act. Wilson proposed that America take a mandate over Armenia, essentially a colonial protectorship that would help the survivors rebuild. But Congress rejected the idea. Americans had no appetite for imperial adventures in the Caucasus. The mandate died, and the Armenians were left to the mercy of the new Turkish Republic, which denied that the genocide had ever happened. So when we ask why America never fought the Ottoman Empire in World War I, the answer is complex. It was partly idealism, Wilson's belief that America should be different from the colonial empires. It was partly pragmatism, protecting missionaries and business interests. It was partly strategy, positioning America for post-war influence. And it was partly cowardice, avoiding responsibility for confronting genocide. The decision shaped the modern Middle East. It shaped American-Turkish relations for a century. And it established a pattern that would repeat itself again and again. America would position itself as the champion of freedom and self-determination. But when push came to shove, when moral principles conflicted with strategic interests, principles would be quietly set aside. The Ottoman Empire is gone. It dissolved in 1922. But the consequences of America's relationship with it, the decision to fight Germany but not the Ottomans, those consequences are still with us. They're visible in every American military base in Turkey. They're visible in every oil contract signed by American companies in the Middle East. They're visible in the Armenian diaspora scattered across the world, still seeking recognition of what happened to their grandparents. History doesn't repeat itself, but it echoes. And the echo of 1917, of Wilson's calculated decision to keep America out of the Ottoman War, still reverberates through the politics of the region today. It was a decision made in the chaos of total war, a decision made to serve immediate interests. But like so many wartime decisions, its effects lasted far longer than anyone imagined. America never fought the Ottoman Empire, but it inherited the world that empire left behind.